We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 44a. The Baraisa continues. Amar tehei sada zu mufkeres liyom echad. Let's say a person says this field should be hefker just for one day, or l'shabes achas, or for just 1 week, l'chodesh echad, or for 1 month, l'shana achas, or for 1 year, l'shavua echad, or for 1 shemitah cycle. So in that situation, when a person makes it hefker in that fashion, so ad shelo zocha ba, if nobody has taken possession of it, bein hu bein acher, not him and not anybody else. So meaning to say he declared it hefker, but nobody then subsequently went ahead and actually acquired it. So then yachol lachzor bo. So then he could still retract at that point in time. But misha zocha, but once somebody takes possession, bein hu bein acher, whether he's the one that takes possession or somebody else takes possession, so then ein yachol lachzor bo. So then he's not able to retract at that point in time. Then the declaration actually takes full effect. And so the Gemara now asks, Reisha Rabbanan. The Reish of this Brisa seems to be the Rabbanan, and Sefer Rabbi Yossi, the Sefer that we just read, seems to be Rabbi Yossi. And the Mefarish over here explains, Reisha Rabbanan v'Sefer Rabbi Yossi. Reisha Da'amar, the Reisha of the Brisa said on the previous Amud, it said, Mishlosha Yamim v'Elech. It said that if somebody declares it Hefker, then after 3 days, let's say somebody declares the property Hefker, so then once 3 days passes, Afilu lo asel Risha Zocha, even if nobody has taken possession, ein yachol lachzor bo, he's not able to retract. To have a hefker, it is considered hefker. In other words, after 3 days, the Brisa said on the previous Amud that it's considered completely hefker, even though no one yet took possession. That's Rabbanan. That seems to be following the shita of the Rabbanan, that you don't need to have someone else take possession. Uvadinu dafilu miyom rishon havi hefker, and really even from the first day, it should have totally been hefker. Elam ipnei haramoyim, but just that we're afraid people are going to try to cheat the system, make it hefker in order to avoid the obligation of Meiser, so therefore we say that for 1 day already, it's not considered hefker. That was a din of the Rabbanon. Kedamar Rabba lekamon, that's what Rabba is going to say later on. Ledivrei hakol, that's what Rabba is going to say later on. The Sefer Rabbi Yossi, but the Sefer, the part that we just read of the Brisa, at the top of this Amud, seems to be Rabbi Yossi. The Amar, because Rabbi Yossi says, Ad shelo zocha ba. Now we had a couple of explanations of Rabbi Yossi on the previous Amud, but this was one of the explanations. This was Rabbi Yochanan's approach. Rabbi Yossi says, Damar ad shelo zocha ba bein hu bein acher yachol lachzor, but that if nobody takes possession, you can still retract. The hefker isn't actually chal. Damar delo have a hefker mido raisa. He says it's not hefker mido raisa adasi l'rishus zocha until it comes to the rishus of somebody who takes possession. Umishamachi katani yachol lachzor, but Rabbi Yossi, that's why it seems to be that you're able to retract at the seifa of the brisa according to Rabbi Yossi. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Ula says seifa nami rabbanon. Really the seifa is also the sheet of the Rabbanan, that really it is hefker, doesn't need to come to the rishus of somebody else to be considered hefker. And so the Gemara says, if that's the case, if the Sefer is the Rabbanan, if so, why is it that if nobody took possession, whether we're talking about him, whether we're talking about someone else, why is it that you're able to retract in that situation? According to the Rabbanan, it should be considered hefker, and you cannot retract. And the Gemara answers, Shani, Shana, Vishavua. It's different in a case where a person says it is hefker for a year or for a specific period of time, a Shemitah cycle, the lo shchichi. Those cases are uncommon, and therefore in those situations what the person essentially is saying is that retracting is going to be okay. And the Mefarish over here explains, Amar Ula says, Ula, Seifa Nami Rabbanan, the Seifa is also the Rabbanan. Tavadami do Raisa, Fagav de lo Asi l'Rishazocha, for sure on a Doraisa level, even though nobody took possession, have a hefker la'alter v'afilu miyom rishon. Really, it is hefker on a Doraisa level, even from the very first day. V'hai do'amar kol shlosha yomim yochel achzor bo delagabe lo chashiv hefker memnei haramon. Like we said before, the reason why it really takes 3 days and you're able to retract within the first 3 days is because of the Ramon, people who are trying to cheat the system and just declare it hefker to avoid meiser. Delkulial mislu derabba domnei haramon dehadri mechanski bu v'amrinan delo have a hefker at shlosha yomim. That's why the Rabbanan say it's not going to be hefker considered for 3 days. So now the question is, if the Seifa is also the Rabbanan, the Seifa do'amar at shelo zocha bo lo have a hefker. Now the Seifa, which seems to say that it's not hefker if somebody hasn't taken possession, to mashman ad da'asi l'rishazoch, it sounds like it really only takes effect. The din of hefker only takes effect when someone else takes possession. So that's because the Seifa is talking about a different scenario. Hainu ta'ima deshani chodesh v'shana v'shavua. The reason is it's different by a month or a year or a Shemitah cycle. Delo shchicha, that's not a normal thing to make something hefker for just a temporary period of time. Dein darkon shel bnei adam lahafker lizman. People generally don't make something hefker for just a set amount of time. V'kevan dezashino lekacham ruchachamim. Since this person changed from the normal fashion, so the chachamim said to lo have lahav a hefker, that it's not considered hefker lahafkui me meiser, to take it away from the chiyuvim of meiser. Calls man to lo asil rishus zoch. If it didn't come to the rishus of the zocha, since the person did it in this kind of abnormal fashion, that's why the hefker is not chal. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Reish Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish says, Mi de Seifa, Rabbi Yossi, Reisha Nami, Rabbi Yossi. From the fact that the end of the Bryce is Rabbi Yossi, the Reisha also is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. The Reisha Hainu Taima, and the reason for the Reisha is, Delo L'shtakach Toras Hefker. We don't want the laws of Hefker to be forgotten. And the Mefarish over here explains, Reish Lakish Amar mi de Seifa Rabbi Yossi, to mashma delo lahav hefker ad asil or shazocha. The Seifa sounds like Rabbi Yossi because he says that the hefker is not chal until it reaches somebody else's possession. So Reisha Nami, so in the Reisha also, Besoch Gimel Ulachar Gimel Rabbi Yossi. It's all talking about Rabbi Yossi. So now we have to explain the Reisha. The Reisha Hainu Tam de Lachar Gimel Yom Ein Yachal Achzabo. Now the Reisha, the reason why after 3 days we say the person cannot retract, even though really it didn't come to the Rishus of the Zocha, to have a hefker Gav de Loasi or Rishus Zocha, it's considered hefker after 3 days, even though nobody took possession. That's for the following reason: Mishum de lo l'shtakach Toras hefker. We don't want the law of hefker to be completely forgotten. To midoraisa, you're really correct, on a doraisa level, vade lo have a hefker ad Osi Rishus Zocha. It certainly is not considered hefker until it comes into the Rishus, until somebody takes possession. Uliolam calls man de lo Osi lidei Zocha, and really, if it hasn't come to the possession of somebody else, lo have a hefker gomer. It's certainly not going to be considered hefker gomer on a doraisa level. The chayav the truma meiser on a doraisa level, there's going to be chiyuvim of truma and meiser. This is only from the rabbanon that we say that it is that has the status of hefker after 3 days. The haiduk mur rabbanon at Torah's hefker. The reason why the rabbanon say that after 3 days it's considered on the rabbanon level to be hefker. Lav mishum lafkui mitruma meiser. It's not really, they're not trying to undo the chiyuvim of truma and meiser. The kevin to midoraisa chayav the lav hefkeru lo mafki le rabbanon mitruma meiser. The way the Mefarish understands, once we're already saying it's chayav on a doraisa level in Trumas and Meisers, the Rabbanan aren't going to undo it. They'll have kol kamine. But the only reason the Rabbanan are declaring that it really is hefker and you can't retract is because they don't want the laws of hefker to be forgotten. When we call makam, and nevertheless, gabeshana v'shavua, when we're talking about making something hefker for a set time, like a year, a shemitah cycle, kaven de lo shchichi, since that's already not kaven, so k'mur Rabbanan adoraisa, there the Rabbanan say that we can follow the din doraisa, to lo have a hefker ad asili de zocha, that it's really not considered hefker until it comes to the hands of somebody else who takes possession. To lo gazr be Rabbanan mishum shelo tishtakach Torah's hefker. In that situation, the Rabbanan didn't make a gezerah to declare it hefker in order that hefker not be forgotten. They only made that gezerah in the reisha of the Bryce, in the case where the person made it hefker and 3 days have passed. And the Gemara continues, Ihachi, if so, if that is the case, afilu miyom harishon nami, then we should say the same thing even from day number 1. We don't want the laws of hefker to be forgotten. We'll have a hefker, so we should say on a Rabbanan level that it should be considered hefker even from day number 1. The Gemara says, no, Amar Rabba says, Mimnei haramoin. The reason why we don't declare it hefker immediately on day number 1, that's because of the Ramoin, the people who are trying to cheat the system, to mafkirin v'hadrin bahon, because what they're really doing is they just make it hefker and immediately they retract. They're just trying to get out of the chiv of a meiser. That we don't want. And the Mefarish explains, again, we don't want the laws of hefker to be forgotten. It should be even from day 1. And he says, really, that is true. It really should be hefker on a derabanan level from day 1. It's because of those who are trying to cheat the system. They want to get out of trumas and meisres. If we're going to say that immediately it's hefker, and it's pater from meiser, then what they're going to do is, again, they're just going to make it hefker, immediately take it back. And that's why we say that for the first 3 days, it's not considered hefker. That way the person will think that because of this somebody else might come along and take it, and it will belong to them. And this will prevent the person from just making it hefker again to avoid the laws of Meiser. And again, really, even after 3 days, it's not really hefker on a doraisa level until it comes to the rishus of somebody else. But the Gemara continues, Aval Doraisa lo have a hefker, but according to this approach, are we saying that really on a Doraisa level it's not hefker? Again, it was only the Rabbanan that declared it hefker in order to lo lishtakach Torah's hefker, that the laws of hefker should not be forgotten. Then we will run into the following problem, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Dalid Amud Beis.